Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. I'm Dave Valente. Travis is off tonight, so it's going to be a quick show talking mainly about the Western Conference playoff race that's going on. It's a very entertaining race, but we do have some NHL news that we'll talk about. Let me get on the scores here. We got a few games tonight, actually, quite a few games tonight. Let us see. Let me get sharing means caring. All right. Make sure everything pops up here. Okay, so tonight we've got the Flyers and the Canadians taking place at 7 o'clock. So that's puck's dropping here in a moment. Panthers are hosting the Red Wings. They are incredibly hot right now. The Panthers are. Red Wings came off a pretty good win against Tampa Bay the other night, so should be a good matchup, even though, Detroit's been out of it, for quite a while. My Sabres take on the Devils. I'm waiting for that game to come on so I can turn that game on. Uh, Also at 7 o'clock, the Penguins host the Bruins. Uh, the Carolina Hurricanes will host the Winnipeg Jets. At 7:30, the Islanders and Rangers, drop the puck. It will be at the, Islanders barn. The Minnesota Wild will host the Canucks at 8 o'clock this evening. Tampa is hosting Toronto. I guess it's an ESPN game, so they're dropping the puck a little later than you would normally see on a Eastern time zone game. But that's an 8 o'clock start. That'll be down in Tampa. That should be a good matchup. Be interested to see how that one turns out. Um, Toronto has really put a good amount of space between themselves and the Lightning for that second spot in the East, the Atlantic Division. Big game for Western Conference playoff purposes. The Stars will be in Calgary to host to play the Flames. That's a 9 o'clock start. I'll be watching that game later. The Kings, another playoff implication game, taking on the Blackhawks. The Kings can do themselves a world of favors if they can take care of business against the Blackhawks, who are playing tea times in a couple weeks. And then the Blues are uh, in San Jose to take on the Sharks. Blues and the Wild both playing tonight, tied on points for second and third in that Central Division. So that'll be a good matchup for the St. Louis Blues. So anyway, let's get to NHL news of the week. There we go. There's my ugly mode. All right. So the NHL is returning to Europe next season. This is good news. This is, Uh, when the NHL starts returning to things that they did before the lockout, that can only be seen as a positive thing. So, two series next fall. One is going to be in Prague the opening weekend. Nashville will be playing San Jose in Prague at the O2 Arena there, and uh, to kick it off, they'll be finishing their preseason over there. So Colorado, or I'm sorry, the Preds will be playing SC Bern Swiss League in Bern, Switzerland, and the Sharks will be playing Eisbären Berlin in Berlin. So those will take place the last preseason game of the season for those two teams, and then they will face off like the 4th and 5th of October. So um, good to see the NHL schedule getting back to normal. Not seeing it slide later into October. We're seeing it early October, so we can get the season done in April, so we can get the playoffs done and dusted by the end of June, and not have to worry about pushing back free agency and the draft and all that stuff like we've been seeing the last 2 seasons. So, um, Colorado and Columbus will play over in Tampere, Finland, at their brand new arena there. It's a beautiful facility. I've seen a couple of Continental Hockey League games, and Tampere Tampere, the team that plays there, was in the Hockey League playoffs, which is kind of like a UEFA style tournament for the European leagues. Champions of and teams that do really well in the Euro leagues get dumped into this all nations tournament. It's kind of a cool concept. Um, So Dallas and I'm sorry, Columbus and Colorado will be facing off there November 4th and 5th. So a month into the season, they're gonna hop on a plane. They'll probably get there if we're going back to normal schedules, each team gets a 5-day break during the season, and I think upon the return from Europe, both teams will get their 5-day break. But on November 4th and 5th, they'll play in Finland. That should be pretty good. I mean, Colorado, of course, has just tons of talent, and I'm not sure how much. Uh, Not sure what it's gonna look like in the off season. If Colorado goes out of the playoffs early, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna blow it up and try and bring in are they gonna fire the coach, or are they're gonna trade off assets? Who knows? So, and Columbus is kind of an up and coming team. I think they exceeded expectations this season. Yes, they missed the playoffs, but I think they're 10th out of the Eastern Conference. So, bad news for Carolina Hurricanes fans. The Freddie Anderson is injured, out at least a week, and this is probably the worst time of the year that you can get a goalie injury. As you're heading into the playoffs, the Canes, of course, are safe are all the Eastern Conference playoff teams. But he had a lower body injury against the Avalanche, and so the Carolina Hurricanes will be turning to Antti Ranta as their starter for the next at least week. Um, it didn't sound good. Rod Brindamore said, "Give me at least a week, and then we'll reevaluate." So I'm thinking it's probably multiple week injury, and that could take them through the first round. So we'll see what happens with that. Austin Matthews is also injured. That's it's noteworthy in the fact that he was chasing 60 goals. Um, I don't know what his status for tonight's game is, but uh, uh, he's 2 goals away from 60, and while I appreciate the chase for a personal milestone, we haven't had a player hit 60 goals since, Alexander Ovechkin, got 60 in 2007, 2008. He got 65 that season. Um, I I think the Maple Leafs would much rather him get rested and ready for the playoffs rather than chase a personal milestone. So we might have seen the last of Matthews for the regular season, or maybe they bring him back for the final game to give him a chance at getting 60. Whenever this guy's on the ice, he can put the puck in the net. So I mean, there's nothing too crazy to think about with Matthews. He makes the lineup better, but the Leafs have been incredibly hot even with him out of the lineup. So, um, and like I had mentioned before, they're pretty safe in that second position to host the first round playoff series or have that home ice for the first playoff series against Tampa. Um, but anyway, so that's Austin Matthews, uh, great season, going to win the Rocket, and but yeah, don't chase a personal thing when your team has been knocked out of the first round of the playoffs like the last 8 times they've been in the playoffs. So, um, want everybody there, full health, full confidence, and ready to go. Speaking of Alex Ovechkin, last night he joins Wayne Gretzky and Mike Bossy as the only player to score 50 goals in 9 seasons. Um, he had two goals last night against the Vegas Golden Knights, although the Caps lost in overtime in that game. Uh, just an absolute snipe on both of them, and he could have had a hat trick. His first shot um, squeezed through the goaltender and was through Robin Leonard and was knocked in by Evgeny Kuznetsov. So he could very well have had a hat trick, but Kuzi gets the garbage goal, and Ovechkin gets the 2 additional goals, and again they lost 4-3 in overtime against the Golden Knights, who are desperate right now. We'll get into that in a little bit. Speaking of Mike Bossy, sad news in the NHL. The This guy was the goal scoring engine of the 4-time Stanley Cup champion, New York Islanders, their dynasty team of the early '80s. He passed away on Friday after a long battle with lung cancer, and So, two members of his line, have passed away, and, it's sad. He was a great player and just had it was like a comet-like career. He started in '77, retired in '88. Um, so he only played 10 seasons in the NHL, got 50 goals in all seasons except for his final one when he was battling back injuries, which was the reason why he ended up retiring. He couldn't get any relief on his back. Um, so yeah, Mike Bossy, not here's some of the records that he has. Most consecutive 50-goal season with 9. Most 50-goal seasons, again, 9, tied with Wayne Gretzky. That those aren't consecutive. He has the consecutive goal mark. As most 60-goal seasons with 5, tied with Gretzky as well. And he's the highest goals per game average in a career with a minimum of 200 games played at .762 goals per game. That's phenomenal. Again, yeah, you can make the case it was early '80s hockey where the goaltenders. I mean, I could score on goaltenders, um, but I don't skate. But what he did in the '70s and '80s, late '70s, early '80s, uh, that team that they had on Long Island was just amazing, and he was the goal scoring engine of that team. We're probably one of the best, right wingers of all time, and, sad news to see him, pass away, uh, at the age of 65, I believe. Uh, Better news, the NHL scoring race, the MVP race, as well is heating up as Jonathan Huberdeau, uh, briefly caught Connor McDavid this past weekend, on points, passing him at 111 points. McDavid did take the lead back last night with a three-point effort against the, Dallas Stars, but, yeah, Connor McDavid has 113 points. Huberdeau has 111 points. This is gonna be a fun one, going back and forth. It might be impacted by the end of the season with Florida, home and clear on the season. Um, but, they've got pretty much they've got the Atlantic Division, fairly well wrapped up. Um, so they might rest him, heading into the playoffs, kinda avoid some injuries and stuff like that. But, and Edmonton has a little bit more to play for, but, uh, I'm all for this because ever since Huberdeau was in the juniors, I thought this guy was gonna be an absolute star, and we're starting to see it. This guy is just taking over this team, and, and I think what's gonna hurt Jonathan Huberdeau as far as the MVP voting is that people are going to say that he has many more tools around him. I mean, you got Ekblad, you got, Barkov, you got, Reinhart, you got all kinds of guys around this team. They really just stacked this team, and that's true. Um, uh, Edmonton really is the McDavid and Draisaitl show. Although, they've gotten some help this season. You've got Evander Kane there now. Regardless of what your personal feelings about Evander Kane are, he's made that team better. And so I don't know. It's if Huberdeau finishes on top on points, and he's trending that way. I mean, the points the last 5 games, McDavid's, only had 5 points, which is, kinda low for McDavid, um, including 3 games where he didn't even score. There's only 2 games where he's gotten points, um, but he can stack them like kindling. Uh, but Huberdeau, has 8 points in the same 5-game period, but over the last 14 of 15 games, he scored in 14 of 15 games and has 27 points, 11 goals and 16 assists in that time. That's March 18th, is where that started. That's an amazing point, and then don't look now, we got Johnny Gaudreau out of Calgary, who's just 5 points off of McDavid, so he's at 108 points this season. So very interesting, the last week and a half of the regular season, and we've got a really good, points race heading down the, stretch. Again, all these teams are pretty comfortable. Edmonton hasn't clinched yet, but, the teams clinching might have an impact on this race and in players being rested. Um, in Seattle, it's been a rough season for the Kraken. There was lots of expectations. I think there was kind of dash when they did the draft, the um, their first draft, and people were like, what was their philosophy?" It kinda bore out this season, and, so it's been kind of a disappointing season for the Kraken, but they got some decent news, this week, at least on the public relations front. Uh, Former Seattle Seahawk great, Marshawn Lynch and, rapper Macklemore, who's a Seattle native as well, uh, are now minority owners. They popped some tags and bought a minority stake in the Seattle Kraken. They're expected to help lead efforts of community engagement. Um, that's a smart move for the Seattle Kraken because it's probably going to be a 5-year effort to get them towards the playoffs. Um, so as engaged as they can make the community is going to be a big thing right now. Um, but that's very much the news for the NHL this week. Let's get into the let's take a look at the get to the standings here. All right, so let's take a look at the Eastern Conference standings. Again, all 8 teams have been with the elimination of the Islanders this past week. All 8 teams are now safe. It's just determining where they fall in the playoff race, where what seeds they're going to get. If the playoffs started tonight in the Eastern Conference, the Carolina Hurricanes, well, actually the Florida Panthers are going to win the Eastern Conference the title in the Eastern Conference. They're battling Colorado for the President's Trophy, but they've won 11 in a row. They're kind of running away with it right now. They're 10 points up on Carolina for first place in the conference. They're 8 points up on Toronto uh, for the Atlantic Division and the Eastern Conference. So Florida will take the first place, and they will play the second place wild card team, which at this point is the Washington Capitals. Despite getting that point last night, they're still 2 points behind the Boston Bruins. They're 3 points behind the. I'm sorry, they're tied with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are behind the Pittsburgh Penguins because they only have. Right, wow, this is very tied. So they've got 34 regulation wins along with the Penguins, and I think they go to the second tiebreaker, which is regulation overtime wins. So the Penguins have uh, 2 more regulation and overtime wins than the Washington Capitals. So the Capitals right now are in wild card two. That could change. And I'm sure the Capitals will love to do that. They've got 5 games remaining, same as the Pittsburgh Penguins. So race to as many points down the stretch as possible to see who gets that third spot. Who will We're not sure who they'll be playing because that top spot in the Metropolitan Division is getting very close too, or is very close too. But anyway, if the matchup started tonight, Washington will be in Florida. Florida will have home ice advantage. Toronto will host Tampa Bay, have home ice advantage for that. Again, that's a tough series for Toronto. Tampa Bay has all that experience. Um, it's just been a difficult, and it's hard to say for a team that's got 100 points, but much more difficult season for the Lightning than it has been in years past. Even with sitting Kucherov for an entire season, only to bring him back for the playoffs. Boston would be playing Carolina in the first round, with Carolina having home ice and Pittsburgh and the New York Rangers, with the Rangers having home ice. Again, this is a very fluid situation with Carolina and the Rangers tied on points. Carolina has the regulation win uh, lead, which is why they're listed as first, even though they have the same number of games played and same number of points. Um, the injury to Freddie Anderson may impact this and drop Carolina back to the second seed, where they would host. It could be Pittsburgh, it could be Washington. We're not really sure yet, but at least we know all 8 teams in the Eastern Conference who are playing and, who's playing in the Eastern Conference and some pretty intriguing matchups as they are now, and I think could get even more intriguing if, certain things fall the right way. Tampa, let's see, they're at 100 points. There's a conceivable, with Boston at 99 points. They could jump Tampa, and, we get a first round matchup, depending on how things fall. I mean, Tampa could conceivably they're 3 points up on wild card 2. If Tampa falls off towards the end of the season, we could get a Florida versus Tampa matchup in the first round, and I am here for that because that was a great series last year. Let's head out west. This is where the real excitement is in the NHL this week. So with what 7 games? Well, there's one game that's going to be played on Monday, um, but I don't think any of the teams involved are involved in the playoffs. So it's kind of an inconsequential game for Montreal. Can't even remember who they're playing, but um, for the most part, teams will be done and dusted on Saturday. And so let's take a look at the Western Conference. If the playoffs started today, what we would see is Dallas heading to Colorado. Colorado having home ice. They've actually clinched the Western Conference, and they're way ahead. They've lost their last 2 games. They had been on a 10-game run themselves. Lost to They had their streak broken by Washington, the other night, so, but I don't think anybody's worried about the, Colorado Avalanche. The, s so, St. Louis and Minnesota would be playing that, 2-3 matchup. That home ice has not been established yet. St. Louis has played 1 more game. They've got several more regulation overtime wins than, Minnesota. Uh Minnesota right now is beating them on points percentage, and but that doesn't matter at the end of the season. Both teams will have the equal number of games. So Minnesota's gonna have to win this outright to be able to get into the uh, get that have home ice in that first round. They'll have to win all 6 of their remaining games. Um, and they're doing well. I mean, 7-1-2 over the last 10 is great. Although the Blues have been 9-0-1, they're just motoring along. We've had a lot of teams going on hot streaks lately that you would expect. Colorado was on a hot streak. Carolina was on hot. I'm sorry, Florida was on a hot streak. The Rangers have been hot. Uh, so uh, in the Central Division, or I'm sorry, the Pacific Division. If the playoffs started tonight, Calgary would be hosting Nashville as the wild card 1 team, with Calgary having home ice, and then Edmonton will be hosting Los Angeles in that Western Conference. But this can all change. Only 4 teams, as you can see, only 4 teams have clinched the playoffs so far. Edmonton is as close as you can get right now. Right now, both Vegas and Vancouver are Vancouver has 1 more game in hand, but the max these 2 teams can get is 97 points. So if uh, Edmonton get back in completely, they could lose the rest of their games. If Vegas and Vancouver do not win out, Edmonton will still get in the playoffs. So I'm not too worried about the Edmonton Oilers, but we'll take a look at their schedule and see what they've got going ahead. Um, in the Western Conference, so the second Pacific team, and we'll talk about Edmonton now. Edmonton has 5 games remaining with 96 points, and their max with 5 games remaining is 106 points. Right now, they only need 1 point to at least get a tie. Then we'll go to tiebreakers on that to get in the playoffs. If they win their next game, they're in. They've clinched. What their remaining schedule is pretty tough in some respects. They've got a mix. They've got 2 real tough games. One against the Colorado Avalanche. They do have them at home, so that's a good thing. Then they travel to Columbus to take on the Blue Jackets. Again, I said the Blue Jackets have done well this season. This is a game that Edmonton should win. If you want to fancy yourself a playoff team, That is a game you should win. That's where you should at least clinch the playoffs. Pittsburgh is next on the agenda. Again, and this is in Pittsburgh, so this is a tough game. Um, you'd like to, maybe play for a point there, but then they've got 2 winnable games heading down to the end of the season. San Jose at home. They should get those 2 points in San Jose, and Vancouver at home to close out the season. Vancouver is battling for a playoff spot. If the stars align, no pun intended with Dallas, Edmonton loses out and Vancouver wins their next 4 games. If let's say if Edmonton loses their first 4 games that they have remaining, and Vancouver uh, wins their first 4 games, then we could be seeing a nice final game of the season for a final playoff spot in the Western Conference. I don't think that'll happen. I think Edmonton has plenty of opportunities to get points, and if they don't, then it's on them for the reason why they don't make the playoffs. Uh, Next team, the third place team in the Pacific is the LA Kings. LA Kings have only 4 games left. You can see 78 games played. They're at 92 points. So if they run the table, and LA has probably got the easiest schedule moving forward. If they run the table, they get 100 points and will be free and clear. Their remaining schedule, they've got Chicago at home. They have Anaheim at home. They just beat Anaheim, although it was a much tougher game than a lot of people anticipated. Um, but it's the freeway series for LA and Anaheim. It's always going to be a rivalrous moment, and anyone can win those games. But after Anaheim at home, then they go on the road to Seattle. Again, that's a very winnable game, and Vancouver. Again, Vancouver could still be playing for their playoff lives, so that might be a tougher game for Los Angeles. So they're gonna wanna stack points over the next 2 games, next 3 games, and not make sure that Vancouver game has no meaning for Vancouver. Sitting in the wild card 1 position is Nashville. They played 77 games. Nashville has 5 games remaining, but I will tell you, this is the toughest schedule remaining. Um, they have a 103 point max. They could get into the conversation. Not really. They can't get into unless Minnesota and St. Louis lose out. They really couldn't get into the conversation to move up. So you're either in the wild card position or they're out. So, but they have a 103 point max. This is a very tough schedule, though. Uh, Our next game is against the Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa. Then they play Minnesota uh, at home. Then they get Calgary at home. Those are, at least home. Bridgestone Arena is still a great place for the Nashville Predators. They play very tough there. So at least those 2 very, very tough games are in Nashville. Then they go on the road for the final 2 games of the season to play Colorado, which will be a very tough game. Although if Colorado has already clinched, home ice advantage and all that stuff, they may rest players and give some younger players a chance to play in the show and get cut their teeth and get them ready for the playoffs as well. Uh, so it could be a good game for them if things fall right. And then their final game, this is the one where this is kind of their must win heading out the door towards the playoffs, and that's Arizona in Phoenix. The final game at Gila River Arena, and uh, you know we'll see what happens with Nashville. Again, this is the toughest schedule of all the playoff contenders remaining. In the wild card 2 position is Dallas. Dallas has 5 games remaining. They're at 91 points, so they have a 101 point max. Again, they don't have a chance of catching any of the top 3 in the Central Division, so it is wild card or bust for Dallas. They have a varied schedule. Tonight they play Calgary. They just played Edmonton last night and didn't look good, and they didn't look good in their previous game against the Vancouver Canucks. So, Dallas needs to get it together. This is a road game. It's in Calgary, so that's gonna be a tough one. But then they get Seattle at home. They go home for the rest of the season, so it's very advantageous for Dallas. They played really well at American Airlines Arena. So Seattle at home, the biggest game of the season. If the things fall right, Vegas Golden Knights will be in Dallas on Tuesday. I'm looking forward to that game. After that, Dallas has Arizona at home and Anaheim at home. So uh, that's a very advantageous with the really tough game against Calgary. They could probably eliminate Vegas on Tuesday if Vegas doesn't eliminate themselves. Um, Arizona and Anaheim, they should be able to get in the playoffs. If they don't get in the playoffs, it's their own damn fault. Speaking of the Golden Knights, they have 4 games remaining. They are currently outside the playoffs looking in. They're 2 points behind Dallas. They're 4 points behind Nashville, and they are 3 points behind Los Angeles. The only thing Vegas could be in the wild card race. They could be in that final position for the Pacific. Um, but I think Los Angeles's schedule over the final week is much more advantageous than Vegas. Vegas at 4 games, 89 points, 97 max. So all these teams that are above Vegas and Vancouver, their goal is to get to 97 points at this point because that will eliminate the Golden Knights and the Vancouver Canucks. But uh, uh, the remaining schedule for the Golden Knights, they've got San Jose at home. That should be a win for Vegas, although Vegas has been very sketchy against lower teams. They lost this week to New Jersey at home and did not look good. And Robin Leonard did not look good. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Um, they have Dallas in Dallas, they have Chicago in Chicago, and then they end the season in St. Louis. So they're on the road for 3 games, 3 of their final 4 games, and that's gonna be very tough for Vegas to, uh, squeeze all 8 points out of that. They I would say they have to run the table to make the playoffs. There's no more margin for error. I think they lost all of their margin for error in that New Jersey game. So, um that was their error, so, Vancouver, they are at 87 points, they have 5 games remaining, so they're at a max 97, so again, that goal is 97 points if you're above those 2 teams. Minnesota at home or I'm sorry, Minnesota away, which will be a tough game. Calgary away, which will be a tough game. Then they've got Seattle at home, um, which should be a lot better, a lot easier points game to get points off of. The LA Kings are at home as well. That's advantageous because the Kings getting the Kings in Vancouver would be a lot easier than going down to LA. And then they got to go on the road the last night of the year. We talked about before with Edmonton. They have to play Edmonton in Edmonton. And again, if the things fall right, then they could be playing for that final playoff spot. But I will tell you, I think right now the teams in the playoffs, if I'm worried, if I'm a team that's in the playoffs and looking at the schedule going down the end of the season, I would be worried if I was Nashville. Nashville's just got a really gauntlet schedule going with several playoff teams, top teams, Tampa, Minnesota, Calgary, Colorado, with only Arizona playing for the tank at this point, standing that would be conceivably an easy game for them. Luckily, they got a couple of those at home, uh, and they've done a lot to, I think they've done enough at this point to get in the playoffs. I think probably 94 is more realistic as far as what gets you in the playoffs. But I think Dallas and Vegas are going to beat each other up. I think Vancouver's just it doesn't have enough runway at this point, even though they've got the extra game in hand. They're still 2 points back of Vegas, so they have to jump Vegas and get over either Dallas, Nashville, or Los Angeles. Um, So, yeah, that's the way it looks. I think most of the teams are pretty safe at this point that are in the playoffs. It's just a matter of it's not really a matter of seeding right now. I think, uh, yeah, I mean, Vegas, if they get into the conversation, they could be a wild card or a 3rd in the Pacific. But I think what we're seeing here is what the 8 teams we see here are the 8 teams that are gonna make the playoffs. We'll rapidly start seeing X's fill up on this side, when we reconvene next week. Um, let's take a look at the scores. Oh, let me talk about Robin Leonard. Uh, Robin Leonard was the starting goalie last night against the, Washington Capitals. Had a leaky goal to start the game by Evgeny Kuznetsov. There's another goal that was called back on an offsides. Um, you know, and the interesting thing was after the first period, Coach Pete DeBoer, who's got a kind of a reputation about uh, not being a very goaltender friendly coach, just ask Marc Andre Fleury. Uh, he pulls Robin Leonard and puts in Nate Thompson to finish out the game. Nate Thompson does give up a couple of goals, but Vegas responds and wins in overtime. I don't know that we see. Robin Leonard did not look in the New Jersey game. Did not look really comfortable in that Washington game in that one period. I don't think we see Robin Leonard the rest of the season. I think this is on a rookie goaltender. We might see Robin Leonard if Vegas gets eliminated. They might just stick him out there to play if that happens. But I think this is Nate Thompson's show going on the rest of the season. So let's take a look at the scores before we close up for the night. All right, so we got some goals. We got the Flyers up on the Canadians. Battle of the bottom dwellers. The James Van Riemsdyk scored his 22nd of the season at 7:43. We've got 1-1 game between. Oh, just saw it update. Wow. Uh, and good news, Noel Achari returns for the Florida Panthers, and he actually gets his first goal or second goal of the season at 9:19. Sasha Barkov just scored a power play goal, his 38th of the season, to match Detroit's Sam Gagne, his 13th of the season at 4:08. I guess Detroit took an early lead in that game, and the Panthers, as they have done in the last 11 games, have stormed back and uh, taken a lead. Um, my Sabres are tied with the Devils. I need to watch that game because it's one of the. Actually, no, this is a road game, so it's not a regenerate game. But Sabres getting outshot 10-7, with 2:15 left in the first, but no score. The Bruins are down to the Penguins 1-0. Jake Guentzel gets his 38th of the season, 7:49. I mean, yeah, Jake Guentzel gets the benefit of playing with guys like Sidney Crosby or generally Sidney Crosby. 38 goals. Just remember that Sidney Crosby was injured for much of the first month of the season. 38 goals is a pretty stout number. Um, he wasn't like the big guy to come out of college and to see him drop 38 goals. That's a really good number. Um, Kyle Connor, it's his 44th of the season. That's a really good number for him. He's had a really good breakout season at 7:10 to give the Jets a 1-0 lead on the Hurricanes. Again, the Hurricanes were playing without Freddie Anderson, who got hurt, and we're going with looks like Antti Ranta in that game. And the final game that's currently going, the Rangers and the Islanders, no score, just underway, 18:36 left in the first. So anyway, that is it for this show. Bring me back full screen. There we go. Um, again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Whether you're watching on Twitch or uh, uh, Facebook or YouTube, I really appreciate it. Give us a like, share, subscribe, whatever. Helps our algorithms, helps get us in front of more eyes. Um, anyway, hope to be back next week with Travis as we go through the final week of the NHL regular season. Playoffs are coming. Best time of the season, best time of the year. Playoffs. Even though my Sabres aren't even anywhere near it, I still love the NHL playoffs, and because it's just the best hockey. And I will tell you, if you ever get a chance, if you're anywhere near an NHL arena that's hosting playoff hockey, go to that game because there is nothing more intense in this world than watching a NHL playoff hockey game. I've been to a few in Washington and St. Louis, and uh, uh, it's a great atmosphere to get into. So, anyway, thanks everyone for watching, and we will talk to everyone next week.